Hey everyone, and welcome to our March live event for National Sewing Circle. We're once again joined by Nicki LaFoille to answer all of your sewing questions. So thanks for being here, Nicki.
Hi, glad to be here.
Perfect. So we're going to start tonight off with telling you about a free project that you can download by clicking the banner above or below the video you're watching right now. And that is our Spring Mix and Match Applique Table Runner project, which is full of 9 free applique blocks that you can make. So they unlock as you go. So the first one is already unlocked, and it is the painted Easter egg. And then there are 8 more that will unlock starting the first. Not all are Easter themed. They're either Easter or spring themed, so you can sort of put together whatever your preference is. But Nicki, have you ever done applique?
I have, yes, I have done some small applique things on, I don't even remember what it was for, on a t-shirt or on like a bag or something, but yeah, applique is really fun, and it's an easy way to add little motifs to your projects. So the easiest way to do applique on your machine is by getting fusible web, I think. Is there a specific name for it? Fusible.
I mean, I used to call it Wonder Under, but that was like the brand. But I think fusible web is the actual like name that you're supposed to use.
Right. Yes. So fusible web, the generic term for Wonder Under. And you can trace whatever shape, or if you have printed out a template, trace your template onto your fusible web and cut it out. And you want to do that mirror imaged when you're tracing your template, because then you fuse your template onto your fabric that you will be appliquing, so that then when you flip it and put it onto your base fabric that you're appliquing it onto, then it will be right side up. Or yes, mirror the correct mirror image.
The way you want it to go. It'll be the way you want to go. Which is something I do want to point out, that on this pattern, we've already reversed all of the images for you. And there's a little like asterisk on there that tells you all images that need to be reversed have already been reversed. So just know that you don't have to do that step on this pattern in particular. Perfect.
Good to note. And if you're doing your applique on machine rather than by hand, it helps to have an applique foot if you have something like that, or if you have a clear foot, that helps, or if you have a foot that has like a toe that's kind of more open, so that you can see where the needle is going as you're appliquing. And yeah, you can choose from a bunch of different applique stitches. The zigzag stitch is a good standard. But there are a lot of different applique stitches out there. You can check on what built-in stitches your machine has. And there are a lot of fun things to do with your thread too. You can choose a thread color that contrasts your applique fabric or matches it, so that it kind of blends in. And yeah, a lot of fun things to play around with, but I don't know that I have a whole lot of specific tips for applique, but I know Ashley is like the master at applique, so maybe she has some things to tell us.
Well, I was gonna say, I mean, I guess I don't want to bore everybody with all applique all night. So if you do, like, if you're interested in applique and you want, to do this and you've never done it before, check out National Sewing Circle's Facebook page, because earlier this morning I actually did a full step-by-step tutorial on this entire block, start to finish. So that'll kind of give you a more in-depth look at it. But you mentioned you like zigzag stitch. Blanket stitch is my personal favorite. And of course, I have to match my thread color to my fabric color. Like, everything has to match, which is also why I have to have hundreds of spools of thread, like, at any given time, so I have every color. But yeah, that's definitely something that you can do, is sort of change it up with some contrasting color thread as well. All right, our next question here. My question is how to make purse zippers look more professional. The ends are not always easy to push out and make them look good.
Yes, so zippers can definitely be a problem area. There are a whole bunch of different ways to insert a zipper into a purse, depending on where you're putting it and just what your project is. So I know I have a video actually on the National Sewing Circle site. I'm taking Ashley's line here for a minute. I think it's my intermediate sewing tips videos. I've got a long video got a whole bunch of tips on everything, but tips on inserting zippers. And I think I have some short clips too about inserting a zipper a couple different ways, possibly. So that would be a good visual, since I don't have any zippers with me right now and can't really do a tutorial. So you can check that out. But just in general, for inserting zippers, interfacing is great to use when you're inserting zippers, because it's a stress point on your purse, and interfacing helps strengthen your fabric, strengthen your corners, so that nothing will, you know, give or rip or get wonky or wobbly as you're sewing it and as you're using it. And if you're inserting a zipper, like into like a little window. So if you would do if you're doing like a pocket on the front of your purse, you would, you know, measure your rectangle and cut a slit to open it up, and, you know, have your facing and everything. When you're inserting a zipper that way, I find it helpful to count your stitches when you're stitching in your zipper, on your short ends. Count your stitches so that you know when you get to the other side, you're doing the same amount of stitches on the other side to make sure you're making it square. So that's like my most general tip that I can give you without having a zipper in my hands, to show you.
Perfect. So our minds went in total opposite directions, because the first, when I read that, I was thinking of, you know, the zipper along the top of a purse, and so I was thinking zipper tabs.
Right.
Can you explain what zipper tabs are? And like, I mean, I know you can't show it, and I know we have videos on National Sewing Circle on how to do zipper tabs, but just kind of explain what they are.
Yeah, so when you've got a really long zipper that you're inserting into the top of a purse, and so you've got like the ends of your zipper are going to be left free, kind of, and you've got those like flaps kind of that you've stitched your zipper into that go on the top of your purse. So you can make tabs for the ends of your zippers to just kind of clean up the ends. And it's really easy. You can just cut little scraps of fabric to stitch around the ends of your zipper. So you would sandwich the end of your zipper in between the right sides of the fabric, and so that the raw edges would be even with the end of the zipper, like the raw end of the zipper, and just basically stitch 3 sides of the zipper and kind of pull it all right side out, and then you can tuck the insides, the remaining raw edges in, and finish that off. So it's just one way to do it, a real quick and easy description. You know, there are different ways to do it, but yeah, I'm sure there are tutorials out there for that too. Again, I wish I had, you know, stuff with me that I could.
We just need you to, on the fly, be able to whip up a bag like right now. But no, so yeah, you can use zipper tabs, definitely, like you said, and I believe you did an actual class on, I believe it's a faux leather bottomed bag, which has the flaps, and it does have, I don't know if it has a zipper in it or not. Similar, the flaps that you're talking about is in that one. And then you can sort of do a play on those flaps too. I'm sorry, the zipper tabs also, even if you're not leaving the ends freestanding, but you're actually stitching them into the bag. So, and I know we have tutorials on that as well. Aurora, our instructor, does a lot of like boxy pouches, and she always puts little tabs at the ends also. So you can pretty much put them on any way that you want a zipper to be inserted. All right, our next question here. What is the best sewing machine for sewing denim, and what is the best one for embroidery?
Wow, that is a tough question, because, you know, what is the best is very subjective. You know, you ask one person, they like a certain brand. You ask another person, they like a certain brand. I love my FOF. I've got a FOF Passport 2.0. I use it for, you know, it's the only machine I have, so I use it for all of my sewing. And I've never had a problem with it. It can sew on anything that I throw at it. So that's a great one. If you're going to be sewing like really heavy duty things, like a whole bunch of layers of denim or a whole bunch of layers of leather, You can look into more industrial sewing machines, the really like heavy duty ones. So this is basically like what you would call a home sewing machine, just like a general all-purpose sewing. And like I said, it does everything that I need it to. It has a million built-in stitches. It's got this cool integrated dual feed foot. Let's see if my camera can get it a little bit. So the integrated dual feed foot is this little black thing at the back of my presser foot that comes down and kind of hooks onto the bottom of my presser foot, and it acts like a walking foot basically. So on your throat plate, you've got, the feed dogs that are feeding the bottom layer of fabric through. So the little walking foot on top helps feed the top layer of fabric through at the same rate, so you don't get shifting, and it just helps everything slide through. I always leave it engaged unless I've got a different foot on there, like a zipper foot or something, and it won't engage. But otherwise, it's just always on, and it helps everything to be just that much more precise. So I like that about this machine. But if you're shopping for a new machine, just think about what you will be using it for, and it definitely helps to shop around. You can look online, and a lot of the sewing machine company websites allow you to compare their different sewing machine models on their websites. So, there's Baby Lock, Bernina, Singer, Husqvarna Viking, Pfaff, Juki, White, a whole bunch. I don't want to, it can be overwhelming to go looking for a new sewing machine. But if you shop around, you'll be sure to get, the best bang for your buck and get all of the features that you will use. So if you're more into quilting, there are machines that combine sewing and quilting in a machine and will have features specifically for quilters, like, a bigger opening here to allow more fabric to get passed through as you're quilting or sewing, those big quilts. One thing I want to mention, some sewing machine websites don't show you prices on their website, which is super annoying to me. But you can always go to a sewing machine dealer if you've got one near you. I live in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, so I don't have many sewing machine dealers near me. I rely on the internet for everything. So before I buy anything, I go online to read reviews. You can find reviews on Amazon, or you can Google search reviews of da-da-da-da machine, whatever machine you're looking at. Or Google, top 10 sewing machines or whatever, and read reviews. But if you have a sewing machine dealer near you, going in and test driving the machines is super helpful, so you can get a feel for it and have someone show you all the different features and give you a little tutorial on the machine. Is super helpful. And then as far as best machine for embroidery, that's the same thing. You want to shop around. If you have something specific that you're really looking for, you can make sure the machine you're looking at has what you need, all the features you need. Pfaff makes some really good embroidery machines as well. And when I worked for Sew News magazine, we had a number of embroidery machines in our office, and I always went to the Pfaff to do my embroidery projects at the magazine. So that's my 2 cents there on the best machine, but you can shop around and make up your own mind.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you want some help making up your mind, we of course have, I think, a handful of videos and even a couple articles on National Sewing Circle about, tips for choosing your machine. We have an article with like things to think about, and it's almost more like a checklist of things to go through, like, what do you want to sew? What is your budget? How often are you going to use it? And little things that you may not think about when you are picking your machine. And like you said, of course, we all have our sort of brand favorites. I am one that I kind of have a collection of things. So I have a collection of thread. We all know I have a collection of some machines. I have several that I use. Viking is my new favorite. new Viking machine is what I've been using for sewing and quilting. And then I do have a Viking embroidery machine too. So like you said, they all kind of have different features. You just got to find what works for you. I will say that one of my new favorite things about this one, because you were mentioning like what can sew through denim or multiple layers of denim, is that this one automatically senses what you're sewing and like how thick it is, and it just changes the settings for you. So this thing is smarter than I am, and it's amazing, and I really need that. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, those are cool. It's great. They're making machines nowadays that are like little computers in themselves.
Yes.
They're cool.
This one plays video tutorials, and I'm afraid that Nikki and I are going to disappear. So. Just kidding. Okay. It doesn't talk that I know of, so I think we're good.
Yeah.
All right. Our next question here.
We are cuter than the machine. Still a new product.
All right. Pamela says she has not sewn in over 30 years. What's the best way to get started? I noticed that when I sew, I can't seem to sew a straight line. I'm all over the place. How do I fix that?
Well, in terms of the best place to get started, if you're getting back into sewing after a while, or if you're just starting to learn how to sew, best place is just to start small. Start with a small project like a scarf or a little tote bag or something easy and quick that you can whip up without frustration, and something that you can use or wear and show off and get excited about, and get you excited for your next project and excited to learn more and grow your skills. And one of the best ways to get excited about a project is to pick out a really cute fabric. So make sure you pick out a cute fabric. But yeah, a skirt, a pillowcase is a really good, quick, easy project. A little makeup bag, or just a little something like that, is a really a fun place to start. And as for sewing a straight line, that is, that's a skill. You've got to, one of the basic skills to master for sure. Luckily, the sewing machines nowadays, most of them come with built-in lines printed on your throat plate or on the machine bed somewhere, so that you can line up the raw edge of your fabric with that line. Or if you don't have a line on your machine bed, you can take painter's tape or something like that and measure from your needle over and place your line of tape there, so that you have something to line up your raw edge with, so you can hopefully get your straight line. And it also helps to, when you're sewing, instead of looking at where you are about to go, just look right at your needle and see where your needle is going. And if you've got something to line up your raw edge with, you'll be golden.
Perfect. So again, we're opposites, I think, on that. Because so I was always told to not look at the needle, because if you're looking at the needle and something's not right, like, it's too late. You're already there. So I think about it like driving a car. You know how you're supposed to look ahead at where you're going? So I'm kind of like looking back. So if my needle's up here, I'm looking to make sure that, what's going to be sewn in like a little bit is, right where. And then, I mean, if you're sewing a small piece, so say you're, I don't know, sewing together a square that's like this, like, machines want to sew straight lines, right? Because your feed dogs and presser feet, they only go in one direction. So if it's getting really far off, that probably means that either what you're sewing is like huge, right, and weighting it down, or that you are the one messing it up. So maybe like step back a little bit and make sure you're allowing your machine to just pull the fabric through.
Right. Exactly. And don't pull it one way or the other. Just, you can pivot if you need to get back on track, but yeah, let your machine do its work. And I think you're right. I think I said it wrong. Don't look at your needle, look at where you're about to stitch, so that you can correct problems before they start. And make sure your machine is on a low stitching speed, and make sure you have good control over what's going on.
Yes, absolutely. All right. Peggy wants to know, could you give a price range for a good all-around sewing machine for a beginner?
Well, Um, I had a brother machine that I bought in college, and then I had a brother CS 2001 or something like that. It was a really, really basic model that was like $250 that I ordered on Amazon, and it was fine. I wasn't in love with it, but it was fine to start out with. It had a buttonhole stitch, which is, you know, a buttonhole stitch, a straight stitch, and a zigzag stitch. And that's for general all-purpose sewing. That's kind of all you really need. But it did feel a little bit lightweight to me. I mean, a $250 machine, you're gonna get that. It was, you know, kind of lightweight. This machine this Hough Passport 2.0 runs $600 or $700, but you can tell it's sturdier, it has more features, and it's just kind of a step up. So I don't know, Ashley, how much is that machine that you've got next to you?
I honestly couldn't tell you, but I want to go back to because you mentioned you had a brother too, and
Yeah.
I know I've mentioned this over the years too, that the first machine that I actually bought myself was also a brother. I bought it in college at a Walmart in Fairbanks, Alaska, and I spent about $85 on it. And I mean, I had that thing for years, and it just was like you said, you could tell that it was lesser quality, but it was kind of like one of those just workhorse, like it just kept going and nothing stopped it ever. So I mean, don't think that you have to spend a bunch of money, especially if you're not entirely sure how much you're going to sew, or if you're not going to sew. I mean, I sew hours every day. Like that is what I do. So like for me, a machine like this is totally worth it because like that's what I'm doing, you know? So, I mean, I guess don't think that you have to like, plunge right in and get something crazy. I mean, even find one if you're friend of a friend selling one at a garage, just try it out. Like if you like it and you're like, yeah, this is something I really want to get into, like then upgrade to something.
Exactly.
And then eventually upgrade to this one because it's amazing.
Exactly, yes. You can definitely start small. There are many reasonably priced machines out there, and if you take good care of it, it will last you, and you know, it'll do it whatever you need it to do.
Yeah. And speaking of taking care of it, like we're not talking, you know, taking it into the shop all the time. It's like basic stuff, right? Like just cleaning out the lint and using it properly.
Yeah, I have never taken my machine into the sewing machine doctor just by, you know, taking some preemptive steps. You shouldn't need to. So yeah, keeping it clean of lint and dust. So every once in a while, just take off the throat plate, and sewing machines come with a little lint brush. Swizzle your lint brush around in there and pull the lint out. I like to floss between my tension discs just because it helps prevent tension issues and keeps everything running smoothly. So if you open up your tension discs wide open, turn it to the largest number, and take a piece of just like cotton fabric, not something that has a whole bunch of lint, fold it in half and kind of floss out in between your tension discs. It'll pull out if anything is lodged in there, any dust, lint, anything like that between your tension discs, which could interfere with the thread that's running through there. And yeah, just keep your machine out of, don't store it in direct sunlight. Don't store it somewhere where it's really humid. Yeah, things like that. Just really basic things will help keep your machine running smooth.
Yeah, absolutely. And talking about taking the throat plate off, like, again, back to some videos we've done on the Facebook page, just kind of showing how to do that, how to take that throat plate off. And you should never be afraid to do at least that. Like even on a machine like this, I'm still going to be totally comfortable with taking off the bobbin cover and taking off the throat plate and knowing that I'm not going to do damage. It's like one or two screws that hold it in place, you know, so you're not like taking apart your machine, you're just lifting a cover. So it's not as intimidating as it sounds. So do it.
Yes, and as far as taking off your throat plate, so your throat plate is right here, I've got one screw here and one screw here, and if you don't have a screwdriver, since this is kind of a short distance, and screwdrivers a lot of times have a long handle, if you don't have something that can get in there, use a nickel. to get in there and really get some torque, because when the machine comes from the manufacturer, that screw is screwed in there tight. And if you need to get a lot of torque on that screw, use a nickel and it'll help get those screws out.
Perfect. See, I always use the end of my little hem gauge thing. And I remember one time we needed it for a photo shoot, and I was like, "You don't want to see it." Like we had to borrow yours, I think, for that shoot.
You did. I remember that.
All right, our next question here. Can you mention some places online that have nice dress fabrics? Not happy with Joanne's selection.
Yes. So nice dress fabrics. I have ordered fabric from windhamfabrics.net. That's WINDHAM fabrics.net, I think. Let me try that link, make sure it works. They have a lot of cute cotton print fabrics. I don't know if that's the type of dress fabric you're looking for. I've ordered fabric from fabric.com, obviously, you know, the standard. They've got a huge selection. Mood Fabrics has their online store that they have a lot of fabrics too. Fashionfabricsclub.com has kind of a wide selection too, and you know, reasonable prices. So you can look there. I don't know, you know, what type of fabric you're looking for, but the big online warehouses like fabric.com and Fashion Fabrics Club have, you know, a little bit of everything. So you can try that.
Absolutely. And I've also ordered fabric from fabric.com, not necessarily dress fabric. I ordered, I think, some faux leather and things, but I do like that you can get, you know, as many fabric swatches. You can just order little swatches as you need. So that way you can feel it, look at it, make sure, because sometimes it's hard to judge online, but that way you can kind of look at it first. So fun little comment here, but Cindy says her first ever sewing machine was a Montgomery Ward tabletop, and it actually still works, and she still has it. See, so machines can last like forever.
Absolutely.
Awesome. All right, our next one here, a question about applique. Should the edges be turned under, or does it depend on the stitch you are using?
If you are using Wonder Under or some type of fusible web, that adhesive will kind of, you know, it will kind of glue down the edges of your fabric. And then the stitch will also help to hold those edges down. But I don't turn the edges under on my appliques. Maybe I'm doing something wrong, Ashley?
No, exactly. Like there's totally different ways of doing it. And I'm going to say it comes down to what you want it to look like in the end, and also how much time you want to spend doing it. Because if you are going to do turned edge applique, is going to be considerably much more time consuming than using fusible web. So this is, like I mentioned, the pattern is designed for raw edge applique using fusible web. And so I did a blanket stitch around the outside edge. So it's 2 straight stitches around the outside edge, 1 stitch into the shape. So what can happen, I was going to try and find or make it happen, is like the edge, I don't know if you can see it, but like you can get a tiny little fray, right? And so that's just something that can happen with raw edge applique. And it's going to happen unless you do the tightest satin stitch all the way around the outside edge. So it's either satin stitch and use a bunch of thread, or sort of just be okay with it. And if you see one, get your pair of snips and just snip it off. But turned edge applique is definitely something you can do. Also, if I'm taking the time to do turned edge applique, where I'm actually, you know, getting my pressing template, turning under those edges, making it super nice, using starch, I'm probably going to hand stitch that applique, because you don't, the whole point of it is to not see those stitches. So you do like an invisible whip stitch underneath. So it's like how much time you want to spend also.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And you, since you mentioned satin stitch, if anybody doesn't know what that is, the satin stitch is just your zigzag stitch, but with the length squished down so much that the satin stitches are really close together so that you don't really see any fabric showing through under the stitch.
Yes.
And my mother-in-law, Karen, is a wonderful quilter, and she does applique a lot of times on her quilts, and she does the turned under edges and the invisible slip stitch or whip stitch or whatever to attach them, and it looks really beautiful. But she's crazy and she spends so much time on her quilts. They are works of art. But you know, the raw edge applique with the fusible web is, you know, is really fun, quick and easy, and looks great too. So yeah, like you said, just a matter of what you want it to look like in the end and how much time you want to spend on it, for sure.
Exactly, especially if you want the stitching to be part of the design, because I'm gonna say like, what, you're like 2 feet away from the camera, you can't even tell if it's raw or if it's folded, and you can't even see the stitching. So I mean, unless it's for competition and someone's like really looking at it, you know. So this kind of goes along with what we're talking about, but Kathleen says, what's the name of the wonder being discussed at the top of the live? I think it was whatever thing you guys were talking about during your first question about applique.
Yes, so Wonder Under is the is a brand name for fusible web. So fusible web is the double-sided fusible adhesive that you use to, you can draw your template on it and then adhere your fabric onto one side, peel off the backing, and then adhere the other side to your applique fabric. And Ashley can show us a bolt.
So most people buy like little pieces at a time. You don't have to buy a bolt of it. You can get, you know, little, like, it looks like printer paper size sheets. You can get it folded up. But I usually have a bolt of it because I do use it anytime I do applique. And so the brand that I always get is Pellon. That's the brand that I use for fusible web, fusible interfacing. It's just easy to find. It's awesome stuff. So yeah, so it's paper on one side. So it's, you'd be able to tell. I feel there's paper. I don't know if you can be able to see, but it's kind of shiny on the sticky side or the glue side. And yeah, so again, if you want the full tutorial on how to use this and how to use it with an applique block, a full tutorial on the National Sewing Circle Facebook page that I did this morning. And of course, you can click the banner above or below the video you're watching right now to download this free pattern so you can play around with applique and fusible web. All right, our next question, Peggy says, I've heard 2 different answers to whether the foot should be in the down position or upright position when you are done sewing for the day. Which do you subscribe to and why?
That's not something I have ever really thought about before. I always leave my foot in the up position simply because that is where it is when I take my fabric off of the machine. And I don't know that there is a better, if there's a right or wrong way. I imagine if you left it down for a long length of time, it might, I don't know, create some pressure on the machine bed. But I don't know that there's really a right or a wrong way to do it.
I have a theory.
Tell me.
Why not have a theory about this? I'm going to say that you need to keep it up, because if you were supposed to keep it down, then machines like this that don't actually have the lever to put it up and down, it's simply the button to go up and down. You wouldn't really be able to like lower it after, if you turned it off, like it just automatically stops up, right? And even when you turn it on, it goes through its whole startup thing and it's up. When you are threading your needle to start with a project, you should have it up, right? Because you have to thread with your press your foot up to release those tension discs. So my vote is for up.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, good. Perfect. All right. Kathleen says, thanks for getting to my question, ladies, but what's the thin strip of sticky tape you can apply and sew over?
So the tape would be fusible tape, which is basically fusible web, but in narrow tape form. And the tape comes in a lot of different varieties. There's there's the variety that doesn't require heat. I think, I don't, maybe that's not fusible web then, it's just double-sided tape. But they make a whole bunch of different types of tape for sewing on. But yeah, I would just call that fusible tape.
Yeah, I call it fusible hem tape just because I think of, yeah, the width that it is like a hem. So that, like you said, it comes in 1/2 inch, 1/4 inch. I have rolls of it, but they are out of my reach right now. But there is a video on National Sewing Circle on how to use hem tape and how to apply hem tape. And there is, so you're talking about stuff that doesn't require heat. There is what's called pressure sensitive fusible adhesive. So like you can be, say, doing a hem and you put it on there and then you just push it and it sticks. but it's not permanent. Like you have to actually fuse it for it to be, you know, wash and wear kind of thing. But it will just sort of stick temporarily, so you don't have to pin it. So.
Right. Yeah, and that tape is good for hems because you can, you know, pull out a nice long line of it. You could also use it for, if you get like a wider variety of the tape, you could use it for appliques if, you know, you've got something that shape or, you know, that small. But yeah, I usually think of it in terms of hems as well.
Yeah. Perfect. All right. Someone says, is it necessary to change my sewing machine needle every time I start a new project?
Definitely not. Especially if your project is, you know, just something quick and easy, like you've got, you know, a little purse and it takes you 1 hour of actual sewing time to sew. I wouldn't change my needle then. General wisdom says to change your needle after 6 hours of sewing, but it's not, you know, it's not a hard and fast rule. If you are sewing something like fleece or felt or faux leather, these things dull your needle quicker. So I would actually change my needle more often than 6 hours of sewing time. But also if you're sewing something like just your regular old quilting cotton, it's not like, you know, looking at your watch like, oh, 6 hours is up, I gotta change my needle. You know, it's not like you can go 10 hours, you can go 12 hours probably. But if you notice you're getting some issues, the biggest red flag, if you've got a dull needle, is if you notice flagging of your fabric against your machine bed. So flagging is when the fabric kind of jumps as the needle goes through it, which is a sign that the needle is dull and it's having a harder time going through your fabric. You might also hear a little popping noise as the needle goes through the fabric, the little pop, pop, pop. Your needle is dull and you need to change it. If you start having tension issues, if you get thread nests on the bottom of your fabric or loose threads or, you know, just anything that's going a little wonky with your tension, my first piece of advice is to change your needle. So it is very important for, you know, getting a good line of stitches, having your needle be nice and sharp and fresh. But again, it's not necessary to change it after every project, just around 6 hours or so.
Absolutely. And I don't know if I should admit to this or not, but I never remember to do that. And I never like log how long I've been sewing just because I know it's part of my everyday, you know?
Right.
So I have to say that sometimes I sort of wait until I see a problem, but then it's like, as soon as I see a problem, like I know that's pretty much the cause 90% of the time.
Yeah, that's probably it. Yeah, and it makes it hard when you're changing from project to project and you need a different needle. So when I change my needle and it's only got like 45 minutes of sewing time on it or something, I stick it in a piece of paper and I write down what it is and how long I've been sewing on it. And, you know, that helps me remember when I go to change back to like an all-purpose needle that I can use that for another however long. And it's not the most elegant system, but it works.
I was gonna say, you're so organized. I just put it in my pincushion and it's like a lottery every time I pull one out. Like, maybe it'll work. I don't know.
I love it.
All right, our next one. Pamela says, with regards to embroidery applique, what do you use, if anything, to adhere the applique to the fabric prior to the satin stitch? I did an applique design and it did not lay flat, if that makes sense. Can I use Wonder Under, and is it safe for embroidery machines?
I would say, yeah, I believe it would be. Something you can also use though is a spray adhesive to lay your little applique piece down on whatever you're embroidering it onto in the hoop. So the spray adhesive, they make temporary spray adhesive. A lot of times quilters use it for putting their batting between their layers. But it's just a little spray. You give a little on your fabric and lay your applique down, and it's really easy to pull it up and move it. And it's just, you know, a slight tackiness to keep the applique flat for embroidery. So you can use that. I don't have any fusible web around me to look at the instructions, but I know the Pellon bolts always come with that piece of paper wrapped in the bolt that tell you, like Ashley's got her scrap. I don't know if it'll mention anything about embroidery, but I would imagine you could use it on an embroidery machine, or yeah, I don't imagine there would be anything bad about it, because it's not like it's got a sticky glue to it really that would gum up your embroidery needle if it gets hot with, you know, all the times it's going through your fabric. I imagine it would be fine.
Yeah, I mean, pulled out the instructions here. I mean, if you figure if it's safe for a sewing machine, it's probably going to be safe for a an embroidery machine too. It does just mention that it's, you know, maintains a soft hand after fusing. It says it's sewing machine safe. So I would think it'd be fine. The one tip that I always say with when you're fusing it in place is like fuse it and then let it sit until that fabric is cool. Like it should not even be remotely still warm before you try and stitch on it, because then you know that that adhesive that you just melted is still melted.
Right, gluey and gooey kind of. Yeah, let it dry or cool and harden for sure. Yeah.
Perfect. Well, so since we're talking adhesives in terms of, you know, fusible web, fusible hem tape, glues, adhesives, how do you know if one of those things has affected your needle versus if it's a dull needle, or can you tell?
If you're sewing through something that has an adhesive, there is a chance that it might gum up your needle kind of, and you will be able to tell, you'll be able to see kind of goo kind of building up on your needle if it gets that bad. And it might even do some flagging on your machine, like I was talking about, if the glue is kind of sticking onto the needle, and the needle might have a hard time going through the fabric. So yeah, you can take a look at your needle if you're getting those signs and see if there's something building up on your needle. You can take a Q-tip or a cotton ball dipped in rubbing alcohol to try and clean your needle off. See if you can get some gunk off your needle. See if that helps, and if it doesn't, then just change your needle, because your needle is dull and it doesn't have anything to do with the adhesive. But most adhesives that are made for sewing are going to be fine, and they're not going to gum up your needle. The only thing is if the product was stored incorrectly, if it was stored in sunlight or if it was stored in a humid environment, that might affect the integrity of it, and you could have issues like that with your needle gumming up.
Absolutely. I think the only time I had issues with sewing through something sticky was sticky back Velcro. And normally you can still go ahead and sew through that, but just random tip, don't try and sew through the one that says it's industrial strength glue. Velcro, it doesn't work. Like literally the needle went down and then it just never came back up. Like it was stuck. So don't try that. But if you're attaching Velcro, do you have tips for Velcro since we're on that subject now?
Yeah, so tips for Velcro.
Like, do you normally sew it in place, or do you normally just use a sticky back and just hope that it stays stuck?
No. Velcro, there's so much pressure put on it when you pull the Velcro apart. I don't ever trust the adhesive kind. The adhesive kind is great for positioning it so that you don't have to like try to use pins or clips to keep it in place when you're sewing it. But I always sew through the Velcro to make sure it stays. And boy, if you don't have an adhesive Velcro and you're positioning your Velcro in place, pins don't really work for holding it in place. So I mentioned clips. If you've got clips, if you don't have clips specific for sewing, binder clips work. I have some. If I don't have any binder clips in my sewing room, I'll go and in my cupboards and try to find a clip off of a chip bag or something, you know, like a chip clip. And I, you know, appropriate it for my sewing room. But those work better for, you know, holding your Velcro in place than pins, which can kind of warp the Velcro and, you know, just make it kind of difficult to sew through. If I'm doing just a little square of Velcro, sometimes I'll just hand sew it. But if you are sewing on your machine, you want to make sure you are using an all-purpose thread. If you've got a 100% cotton thread on your machine, cotton thread is a lot of times loftier than all-purpose thread, and that loftiness can kind of get stuck in the hooks of the Velcro, and you'll get thread loops, and your stitch might not lay really nice and flat inside of all that pile of Velcro. So an all-purpose thread, that might be my only tip I can come up with off the top of my head.
Perfect. You mentioned using chip clip bags. I usually, if I don't have something, or same thing with like, say, vinyl or faux leather or something, I usually just pull a bobby pin out of my hair and just like stick it on there, because they're always in there.
Right. Nice. Yeah, that is a good tip too.
I use those for pretty much anything, even like, say, like crocheting or knitting. If you don't have a stitch marker, like bobby pins are really, really handy.
Yeah, nice, good tip. And yeah, for faux leather and vinyl, things that you don't want to pin, clips, binder clips are really good for holding your layers together, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, next question here. What is your preferred pin, and do you change pins depending on what you're pinning?
Yes, I do. So I have a whole pile of different pins in my pin cushion. So a lot of times I'm just sewing on a cotton fabric and it doesn't matter really. But if you're sewing on something really fine like silk or like a satin or organza or something really fine that you don't want to snag, you don't want to leave holes in, get yourself a nice thin box, a box of thin silk pins. So they are called silk pins. They're really sharp and thin. And they slide really nicely through those fine fabrics, and they are less likely to leave holes than some other pins that might be of a thicker gauge, a thicker diameter. And whenever your pins get bent in the slightest, throw those away. You don't want bent pins mucking up your sewing. And I know you've got a million pins in your boxes, so you can afford to throw a bent pin away. It just makes things harder for you when you're trying to get your pins in your fabric and trying to be precise. So yeah, throw your bent pins away. Are you going to show me a bent pin, Ashley?
Well, yeah. So here's I use one of those little magnetic pin cushions, but I don't even know if you can see it because it's so fine. Can you see it at all? Anyway, my point is that this is one of those extra fine silk pins that you're talking about, which are great for so many fabrics. I use these for pretty much any fabric and like quilting and things like that because they are so fine. So if they do get bent, you literally just straighten it back out like that with your fingernail, and now it's like a perfectly straight pin. So like I may have a very expensive sewing machine sitting next to me, but I'm pretty cheap. So I'm gonna save these pins, okay? And I'm just gonna straighten them back out, and now they're, you know, as good as new.
There you go. Yeah, if they're thin and fine enough to go through silk easily, I guess you can just bend them back straight with your fingers.
Yeah, which is like perfect. So if you're somebody who doesn't always remove your pins as you're sewing over, or you forget one, like that is just, the pin is going to bend, but that pin will never break a needle. Like I'm not entirely sure it has the strength to break a needle. So my favorite. All right. Someone asks, should I always sew a muslin as a beginner?
So muslins are basically, you're testing out your pattern. You're testing for the fit of the pattern and like practicing basically your pattern before you cut anything out of your project fabric. It is a really good idea, especially if it's a pattern that you have altered in any way, or if it's something like you bought like a $100 per yard fabric that you cannot waste any of it. You want to test that pattern on something less expensive first so you don't make any mistakes on your really nice fabric. So if you're doing something that's really important like that, or like a wedding dress or something, I would 100% recommend sewing a muslin. When I was going through my my apparel design course in college, they always made us do that. Of course, you know, when they're teaching you, they teach you to do things really nice and precise. So we always made a muslin out of our patterns before we did our project. When I graduated and started doing things on my own, I very seldom make muslins anymore. Halfway because I trust my sewing skills more now, and you know, halfway because I don't ever do anything with fabric that's more than, you know, $10 a yard or something. I'm kind of cheap that way. But if you are doing something, or if you are a beginner too, you want to make sure your end project turns out the way you want it to, because you're putting all of your time and effort into it. You're learning. You don't want to be discouraged at the end of it. So I do recommend making a muslin. It's really helpful for making sure your garment will fit you right at the end of it when you've sewn the finished product in your finished fabric. And yeah, just decreasing frustration by going through it once before you get started on the real thing.
Absolutely, and I definitely second that'll make it look a lot better in terms of fit. And I think sometimes you think, you know, you take your measurements and you're pretty close to the pattern size, so you think it's going to fit you exactly like the pattern envelope model it fits you, you know, and it never really turns out that way. And I know there's even lots of little fit fixes you can do that seem pretty minor. Like, I know this is going back years now, but you and I were part of a video by Cynthia Guffey, right? And she did fitting. We were her little model mannequin things, and it was pretty cool because she did show, I mean, little things like, I mean, taking out, say, like a, you know, a ½ inch or a quarter, and just a tiny little tuck here if you have your shoulders roll. I mean, there's so many just little tiny things that you can fix, and you wouldn't know that they were an issue. But so if you are going to make your muslin, say you're making a wedding dress, are you going to make your muslin out of muslin, or are you going to make it out of a fabric like a wedding dress fabric?
Good follow-up question, and I was going to mention that before we change topics. Yes, you want the fabric you use for your muslin to be a similar thickness, similar hand, similar drape as your finished fabric, as your project fabric, so that you can tell how it's going to lie on your body as close to the finished as possible. So if you're doing a cotton shirt, use a cotton muslin, or, you know, a muslin. If you're making a wedding dress out of satin, try to get something of a similar hand and drape. Even, you know, just like a cheaper quality satin will be worth it in the end to make that, you know, do that practice run and make your muslin, even though it's not actually muslin, we still call it a muslin.
Yes. Aside from making a muslin, what have you ever used muslin for?
I don't think I've ever used muslin for anything other than making a muslin.
And I was going to say, and would you, so my only other experience with it was just trying to use it thinking that it was a cheaper cream colored fabric in a quilt, and let me tell you, I didn't pre-wash that, and like those squares just shrunk up like crazy. So yeah. Like, I'm wondering if you had any other, you know, if you have some left over for something, like what you could use it for.
Well, muslins also can come in a range of good quality and bad quality. Muslin is just basically a cotton fabric in a plain weave, and it, you know, there's a variety of different things available. But if you pre-wash it beforehand, you could, in theory, use it for linings or, you know, facings. Yeah, you could use it for like a purse lining, for yoke facing on a garment or something. If your finished fabric is of a similar color, I guess, or a darker color so that it wouldn't show through. But muslins are usually like a cream or ivory color, just an undyed cotton. So yeah, you could use it for whatever you wanted.
Perfect. All right, I'll put it to use next time. We'll see. All right, so we're almost out of time here, but I wanted to know. So we talked a little bit about, you know, what I'm working on with this spring mix and match table runner pattern, which you should download by clicking on the banner above or below this video. But what are you working on? I haven't asked you yet what your latest project or creation is.
I recently, so my daughter just turned 5 this month, so I was crafting all kinds of birthday party crafts for her. She chose a Hobbit theme for her 5th birthday because my wonderful daughter is wonderfully weird. And I love it. So she and I were nerding out and doing all kinds of Hobbit projects. So anyway, for the kids' goodie bags, I made little pouches, like little treasure pouches, and I put, you know, chocolate coins in there and little miniature dragons and stuff. So the pouch didn't require any actual sewing, but it was crafting, and we're all crafty people, so I'll tell you about it. I cut a 14-inch square. I did 14 of these, so I got 14-inch squares, and fold it in half to, you know, make quarters, and then I cut the edge in a curve so that it turned out to be a circle. And then I cut slits. I did 16 equidistant slits all around, perpendicular to the cut edge, and I threaded 2 lengths of ribbon through to make a drawstring bag. So I threaded the 1 length of ribbon through this way, and then the other length through that way, tied the ends so that when you pulled it, it would cinch together in a little drawstring. So that was my project. I spent many nights, you know, in front of the TV, just like clip, 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 and it's kind of like, you know, the process, the going through one after the other. But I had to make sure, because I used a knit fabric, because I happened to have some knit fabric that was this silvery, shiny, kind of like a treasury feel to it. And I had to make sure, since the edges of that knit fabric kind of curled, I had to cut my slits at least 1 inch down from the raw edge, because otherwise the edges would curl too much and interfere with the ribbon. And I used like a 1/4 inch satin ribbon to thread through so that it threaded really easily and the kids could, you know, open and close them up easily without the ribbon kind of getting snagged on the roughness of those slits that I cut.
Perfect. Well, I'm gonna have to start thinking ahead to birthday ideas. My son turned 2 today, so he's not quite into anything I sew him yet, but we'll get there. But we're about out of time. But one last question here. This is from Kathleen, and she wants to know, where can we find you, Nicki? Like your videos, etc.
Well, I have videos on nationalsewingcircle.com, some longer form videos, some shorter ones. I have these videos actually go up on YouTube after the fact, so you can find the videos on YouTube as well. But yeah, other than that, I've got a Facebook page. I don't put videos up on it. It's just my, you know, it's just me on Facebook. But yeah, you can find my videos.
They can all stalk you like I stalk you. You know, I want to see it too.
You can friend me. I don't post anything on Facebook, unfortunately. You can find me on Instagram, though. I post some pictures sometimes of my sewing projects. Mostly it's of my daughter being cute, but
perfect.
Yeah, I think my Instagram name is Nicki Lula, and I say K-I-L-O-U-L-A, Nicki Louise LaFoille, my full name.
See, we're learning even more about you now.
Yeah.
And yes, of course, definitely check out. She has tons of really great long form classes, which are, you know, hour-long ones. There are what we call premium videos. So those are, you know, 20, 30, 40-minute long ones. Tons of free little clips if you just want, you know, a 5-minute video on how to insert an invisible zipper. I know she's done that. So we have all sorts of Nicki videos on National Sewing Circle. So definitely check them out. And of course, join us back here next month, and she'll be back here to answer some more of your sewing questions. Thank you, guys.
Thanks.